everyone to a Kitecast. We're excited to have you here. We are thrilled to have Andreas Wuchner all the way from Switzerland with us. Joining us is Tim Freestone, my co-host. Tim, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing, Patrick? Hey, Andreas.
Good.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Andreas, we appreciate your time today. This is going to be a really interesting conversation because your resume won't fit on about 10 of my big monitors, I think. When I pull up,
I know. I was just scrolling through it as well. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
but it means your monitors or your screens are too small, right?
So you've been doing some cool consulting work for the last, 9-10 months or so. For those who haven't been keeping track of you for the last 10 months, what have you been up to?
I decided after 26 years of doing security for so many enterprises that I want to use my knowledge, experience, and first of all, to give back to students and do some mentoring, coaching with people and help especially startups and organization in need with some security practice know-how, with, quick wins and all that stuff. Because, in the small, medium enterprise world, security is what? Security? You're right. It's far behind. Not everywhere, but a lot of you are far behind. And it's surprising also in the Fintech world how many companies suffer through some security breaches and all that stuff. And that's my job now. I'm happy and looking forward to help as many of them as possible.
Well, I think in the past, and well, if you look at your LinkedIn profile, it's cyber and risk expert. Are we going to start talking about risk rather than cybersecurity here pretty soon in the future? Is that going to become the mantra for what folks like you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You see there's a huge shift in the qualification of CISOs, right? You don't find a lot modern days super deep technical CISOs anymore. They have MBAs, they have risk background, and the reason is very simple, right? The top management boards, they don't understand tech talk, right? They want to talk about risks, they want to talk about relationships, they want to understand how something which is maybe deeply technical relates to business processes, to income or missing incomes and things like that, and that therefore absolutely you need to talk risks these days.
Just on that point, Andreas, I read a lot about obviously the cyber landscape, but they tend to put security and risk management. Isn't security nested under risk management, not a separate sort of track, if you will?
It depends from which angle you're looking, right? If you see that, if you take the pure risk lens and you do enterprise risk, then you do ops risk, and under ops risk you have IT risk, and within IT risk you have cyber risk, right? And that's a very clear line, and that's why often you see security budgets and security people reporting to CIOs, right? Because that's the pure flow of information and that's the pure flow of money. However you call this thing, at the end, some organizations have a more technical oriented IT organization, and they talk normally about IT risk or information risk and information security and all that stuff. And organizations which have a bigger risk purpose and really focusing on risk, they normally tend to talk about cyber risks or IT risks, these kind of a little bit more on the risk structure side.
Yeah, I see. And having been out in the field here, touring around both Europe and the US, do you see a difference in the maturity between the two geos? Is one ahead of the other in terms of strategic risk management planning, or are they at par?
I guess what you can for sure say is that the verticals are very different, right?
Uh-huh.
I think from a risk point of view, you can see that the financial service industry and also healthcare are further developed because, in the life science world, they were always afraid about people dying if something goes wrong, right? So they come from a different angle. That's not, if you come with an IT risk and you have on the other side people who are dying, it's a little bit of a difficulty, but that's the nature of the beast that people understand and use to talk about risks. When you look in the SMB market again, then you see problems everywhere. I wouldn't call it out saying, look, US is better or Europe is better. They're good players. They're really, really good and well-equipped companies all over the world. I just came across a Fintech organization in Dubai, and I was totally blown away how much effort they have put on cybersecurity. But you have black sheeps everywhere. So I wouldn't call it really on a geopolitical or geographical level. I would call it, or look at it far more from a vertical level, which verticals are more advanced than others.
Yeah, so, and you mentioned Fintech as sort of obviously a nested part of financial services. Within industries even, there's probably a maturity curve, and companies like in the Fintech sector, by and large, probably sprinting to business value first and thinking about security second, with the exceptions of like what you just mentioned in Dubai.
At the end, every business is there to make business, right? And at the end to make money, to feed the people, or to pay bills and all that stuff. So it's all about doing business, right? But everyone has recognized and learned that wherever there is money, there are people who try to gain it for free or to get access to it, right? So I think if you today and CEO in a fintech organization, you don't care about security, I think you have a pretty short lifespan in your job, because hackers or whoever will find you, right? And often it's not even, we all know that it's not always the bad hackers from the outside, right? There are people in the inside. If they notice, the culture is like this, no one cares. Think about if you sit in the Philippines, and nothing against Philippines, or anywhere else in the world, and you make $1,000 per week, and someone comes saying, "Look, my friend, here's $20,000 per week, but I need this and this from you." Guess what happens, right? So this is all. Yeah. We benefit from this, from the different situations around the world, but at the same time, they are just creating a certain threat to the way we do business.
That brings up an interesting question when you're talking about risk in cybersecurity. Have you seen a model that has figured out how to actually measure the risk as it's associated with various elements of cybersecurity? For example, I was taking a look at the Gartner trends for 2022, and has things like attack surface, identity management, the supply chain, vendor consolidation. It has a list of different elements. There's risk tied to each of those, I would assume. How in the world do you measure that risk and translate that to the board? Because you can talk about cybersecurity to the board, and okay, it goes in one ear and out the other until you start translating it into financial terms. So how do you do that translation and have it make sense to the board, to the C-suite folks?
Two ways, right? The ideal world, and going back to the standard risk and financial risk, ops risk topics, they are normally able to do quantitative risk assessments, and they know if this happens, the impact to the business is this and this high. In IT, we are not there yet, right? There are a couple of companies which have done the exercise, and at least for their crown jewels, they mapped data elements to system elements to business critical processes, right? And they can say, if something happens here, that's the impact. And that's a language which the business, and especially the board, understands super well. But it's so easily said, and it's so hard to do, right? And there's a reason why not many have done it or successfully done it. So most of the organization have a kind of a quantitative kind of risk approach, and they say, okay, look, we have certain thresholds, and if we aggregate these risks, whether it's green, it's yellow, it's red, and we do risk appetite discussions with the board based on these kind of aggregated risk clusters, because on that level you can then easily say, look, me as a board, I care about everything. Let's just make it up, 30 million, right? If something is below 30 million impact, you guys deal with it. Everything above, I want to know. And then you can say, okay, look, based on the critical elements which we have, based on the critical processes we have, we can make it up. It's not science. It's more kind of a look, narrowing down the scope, and then you get there. But it's definitely not 100% science yet, and there's so much more to be done.
Right.
Give you an example about human cyber risk. The humans. How do you quantify a human? And the interaction with a human. What can a human do? If I'm doing a mistake and accept or click on a link in a phishing mail versus I'm a high network banker and the guy or the person opposite of me has hundreds of millions with us in the bank and I do something wrong there, right? This is very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, the human risk vector is almost completely discouraging when I try to think about it, because we're flawed by nature. There's just at some point you hit a risk threshold that can't be overcome, at least not with technology to date. And as you probably know, system intrusion and through phishing and social engineering remain, if not the top, in the top 2 or 3 of most breaches.
But the good thing is that everyone, the enterprises and also the regulator, have noticed that, right? If you see, for example, NIST will publish soon a new standard where they talk about human cyber risk and how to quantify the behaviors, what they do and how they do things, right? There are public source or the public projects out there. One is called CEPDB, for example, which is a database where researchers work together, where they map certain behaviors to risk scenarios. And so that allows you sooner or later to really quantify the things. You see also the cyber insurance world is going in this direction, saying, look, guys, and I think Forrester just did a research on that where they said traditional learning and education is wrong, doesn't work for cyber. Just by knowing that you shouldn't drink beer or you should eat sweets or shouldn't smoke, you still smoke, even if you know it, right? Knowing is not necessarily changing your behavior. And if you want to have a security DNA in your employees and also in your kids and everywhere, you need to address behaviors. When you leave your home in the morning, you never think about locking the door. And no one has ever told you need to lock the door. It's in your DNA because your parents did it. Everyone does it. So that's a DNA. And that's where we need to get to with traditional human cyber risk as well.
I think that's a great point, Andreas. We all have to go through the compensatory required cybersecurity training every year as an organization, right? Every employee sits on cybersecurity training for 2 or 3 hours in aggregate over the year. And it's the same thing, right? It's cookie cutter approach. Each company uses the same model. Is it broken? It seems to be, because it doesn't really translate into the behavior you want at the end of the day.
Nothing at all. It's a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. It's a compliance effort and it fulfills a requirement. Yes, it's done. Okay. But it does not help an organization really to change because, again, I don't know, but I was always bad. I always had students around me. I don't know how many students have done my security trainings.
You said it first. You said it first, Andreas. Obviously, my daughter got really good.
Just be honest.
Trainings.
Yeah. So therefore, there are things which make sense, and I totally get why you do. Why the compliance requirements are like this. Nothing against it, but the world has changed, the world has moved on, and this has to be changed. And as I said, NIST is the first. The Forrester report was a little bit of wake-up call for many organizations, where they really say, look, guys, it's broken. Forget it. Don't waste further money. It's not about doing more. The same, I think what's also cool in this report is the gamification, right? Because everyone says gamification is the holy grail. But it is not the case, because just because you laugh your ass off doesn't make you to change anything. It's just it entertains you, yes, but that's it, right? Nothing more happens. So that's another thing which you just need to consider. And we're learning, we're educating.
So what's going to drive that change, in your opinion? Is it going to be like a combination? Will it be regulation, right? We have NIST and some other things that are trying to drive some behavioral changes, things that can actually be measured from a regulatory standpoint. But then you'll have companies that, won't simply roll out those videos that you have to watch for an hour and then you get it's checked off that you completed cybersecurity training, but do something completely different when it comes to monitoring and influencing the behavior that you want in employees when it comes to risk management?
I think I see several areas, right? One is the industry, the cyber education industry, which is now moving into this direction. But what is far more important for me is the boards are waking up as well, right? Because, as I told you, have the pleasure to sit together with on my own on some boards, but also I get often asked by a board member saying, hey, I don't know security, but I need to blah, blah, blah. Can you help me? And the question which always comes up is, are we doing enough? We spend so much money. Do we spend it the right way? Do we address the right way? Or we have spent so much money, we still have a cyber incident. And, when you get the post-mortem of the incident, you say, oh, someone clicked on something, or someone got attacked at some money. Oh, the third party there did something which we hadn't under control, right? So, and I believe whatever statistic between 70 and 90%, it was a human who did something. So therefore, the people at the board members and the higher management, they're not stupid, right? They say, look, we invest all in these toys and tools and stuff, but the problem is between the keyboard and the seat, right? So, hey, let's address this. And that's a trigger point. And now I just had a discussion with colleagues here from Deloitte in Switzerland. Whenever they do corporate audits, they start asking these questions as well, saying, hey guys, you board member, what are you doing about your humans? How do you address that? What is compliance versus what is really this kind of behavior aspect? And that's a good sign. Will it be done tomorrow? No, but it will, the next 1-2 years, I guess we will see a major shift.
Yeah, well, I think also the sophistication of the social engineers on the bad guys side is getting pretty incredible. I just, as an example, and this was maybe 5 years ago, so it's even more sophisticated, but I've been working in cybersecurity and tech for 20 years. I've gone through those trainings. Like I said, maybe my kids have taken a few. I know what to do and not to do. But I started at this cybersecurity organization 4 or 5 years ago, and in the first 2 weeks, so in the marketing organization, you do a lot of shipping and sending, and you get a lot of invoices. I got an email with a FedEx label. I get them all the time for different things. I clicked on it, ransomware, shut my computer down, right? And I know what I'm doing. Right? That's like, I should know better sort of a deal. And I worked in a cybersecurity company that has their own incredibly high or low threshold for risk. So they had all of the technology, but it still got through. And basically the point of the story is the social engineers, the hackers, are looking at departments. What are these people thinking? What are they most likely to click on? It's just getting more and more difficult.
Yeah, but that's exactly these domains in behavior, right? Things like time pressure, annoyance, and culture in an organization. Just look out this week. Uber got hacked this week, right? Mm-hmm. And if you see the attack vector, it's called 2FA DDoS. So they use two-factor authentication, but the attacker, they just found out for whatever way, user ID, password, and they just started to use it and annoy everyone, get one request for second authentication again and again and again. And after the 10 or 12th request, the people tend to accept just to get rid of this nonsense. And that's how it works. And guess what? I have 2 of my companies which I'm working with, which have this problem. Just seeing it on left of in one of the Slack channels where they say, look, hey, please do not accept any two-factor authentication requests. And this is just a new thing, right? But again, annoyance. We all want to get rid of stuff. We want to get things done. Pressure, this phishing thing. Oh, I need this now. I'm the CEO, blah, blah, blah. Then this. That's where people want to please, or they want to. And sometimes it's just we are under pressure, right? Because there's so much stuff. Most probably the mail which you have looked at and clicked at was not perfect, but it just looked normal, right? And yeah, we all have a job to do, and we all want to do the right things and want to get our job done. And we are not necessarily security experts or detectives who figure out every little thing. So the future, or the truth most probably, is in a combination of strong tech with a lot of detection capabilities and people who have a kind of a cyber aware DNA saying, does this make sense, right? I think if you just apply sense and get away from the pressure, then a lot can be prevented. But, if I just want to fish you, Tim, and I spend enough time and energy, I find out what your kids are doing, which golf club you are going to, and all that stuff, I will get you. There's no way that you can prevent that.
Yeah, you'll be able to do it. So it seems insurmountable. Like, we've been through this conversation, not you and I, but I've been in the conversations before. Where do we go from here? With Uber, right? It's just every day. And it's getting more and more. The Verizon data breach report, that looks uglier and uglier every year.
It proves just one thing again. Compliance doesn't mean security, because we all have to report on click rates from the phishing simulations, the repeated clickers, and some call them clickers, some offenders, whatsoever, however you call them, but they're completely worthless, to say it really brutal, when it comes to your overall cybersecurity posture. You are compliant, you are below 4%, you have all that done. So you as a CISO, you cannot be fired for not having done your job. Okay, but it doesn't mean anything. Your organization is not more secure just because it's 3.9% and things like that. Yeah. And where is it going? It goes into a direction where we all improve, right? We need to, or we will figure out whether we have more controls which are self-learning and really covering all the stuff. One of the biggest problems is that the high dependencies, right? We are highly meshed, and there is, if you just had a report before, I think it's still on my table somewhere, 7% of enterprises are still believing that the cloud providers are responsible for bringing or monitoring their security posture. Ha, ha, ha. The people I don't know, either they haven't read the policies or the documents they signed, or they're just in dreamland. And you see so many hacks which were successful through third parties. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that third parties are a bad thing or cloud is a bad thing. Totally not. But you need to integrate it. It doesn't help you if the cloud security provider has 99% safety and security, and you on your internal side have only 70%, right? Attackers will always find a weak link. Yeah. I don't think that it's, if you are the super duper executive working for the big corporation, would I go after your banking computer? No, I wouldn't. I would go after your kids, right? Because over your kids, I get into your network at home, or at network at home, I see what you are doing, and so on and so forth. Just if I have time, I find an easy way. So security becomes more and more of one side a risk topic, so really say, okay, what are the threat vectors? Where am I vulnerable? And then secondly, to an end-to-end game. And that's what Patrick mentioned before about the whole risk management thing, right? If we only look at certain things, you know that you can do a NIST or ISO certification only for one process, right? And then call yourself, I'm ISO certified. You can, right? But this is not helping. This is maybe separating, and it sounds good, but it's not helping your overall security posture. And we will see, or I'm pretty certain that we will see more of this bigger picture approaches where you give you an example, board discussions or this tabletop exercise with boards are still more or less an exception. Not many organizations do that. And when there is a cyber incident, everyone runs around like a headless chicken, because who informs whom? What I want to know? Who declares all that stuff, right? Simple things. Only because I'm a board member, I'm not Jesus. I'm not walking on water, right? It's these things you need to go through once, and best before something happens, and then we all make it better. Yeah. And security, I guess, we all three are in this space, and all three of us most probably will retire in this space because security will not be solved by the time we retire.
Not until Elon Musk finishes the singularity and we're all connected, and it'll be controlled.
Speaking of boards, Andreas, you bring up an interesting point. There's been discussion the last few years about you got to get a CISO on your board so you have a security view, because you have financial experts, marketing experts, sales experts, merger and acquisition experts on many boards. But typically, historically anyway, you didn't have a cybersecurity or risk management expert. You actually are sitting on some boards and providing that today. So that paradigm seems to be changing. Where do you see that headed? And then many who are listening to today's podcast may be CISOs, and they're probably wondering, how do I become a member of a board? How do I get that type of gig? What recommendation do you have for them?
I disagree with that statement that every board needs a CISO for the simple reason. I've done my entire life security stuff, right? And when I'm the board, which I'm sitting on here in Switzerland, that's a security company, they live and breathe security. So the topic on these board meetings has often something to do with security products, go to market and things like that. There, I feel super comfortable and whatsoever. On some other boards where I'm doing advisory stuff, they talk about life science things which are far beyond my head. And sure, I'm learning something every single day, but I'm often sitting there and thinking my contribution to that overall board is rather small. And, there are so many tables you can sit on. And I think as a CISO, you should really make an effort to find the table where you can make an impact. If you're COO or someone, the CFO sits on the board and he has the security head on somehow beside, and you help the person to be the go-to person and help and all that stuff, I think you get far more value and far more return than just sitting there. And because everyone will look at you and saying, oh, the guy never or the girl never says something. If the time comes and he or she says something, it's negative, it's a problem. This is not really helping your reputation and not helping the situation. So therefore, there are good companies where one board member with security knowledge is really, really helpful. But overall, I think be a good executive member in one way or the other and support the board with knowledge and with information they understand and then can articulate is sometimes better than trying to be super duper shiny and rock star, because all about value.
You got to know the business, it sounds like, to be a really, really good CISO. You got to know that industry backwards and forwards, like you do financial services.
Sure, absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense.
You mentioned risk in third parties. Kiteworks may or may not know something about risk in third parties, but I was surprised the 2022 data breach report that Verizon put. How many years have they been doing that, Patrick? Like 20 years, that report?
Over 20 years. They did a look back to 2008, I think, in this past report.
Yeah. I think it was the first time I had seen the partner ecosystem being the number one vector for breaches when it comes to system intrusions. And then, to top that off, obviously that's heavily influenced by supply chain, specifically software supply chain. But to top that off, the third-party risk management and all the vendors that are popping up to protect that, it just seems like the risk board, to use an analogy to the games at least we played growing up, is getting bigger because of this third-party risk vector. The ecosystem of third parties is just incredible. We have one small county in California. They have a small county in California. They have 800 business partners. A report Patrick did, 6 or 7 months ago, said that the average business or enterprise has more than 2,500 business partners. And when you get into Fortune 500s, it's tens of thousands of business partners. Mm-hmm. the scale of where data goes is just incredible these days. Is that coming up in the conversations you're having at board levels?
And the bad guys know it, right, Tim? To build on what you just said, listen to this, and I'll let Andreas answer. I was looking at the Mandiant report published earlier this year. 17% of all attacks that were successful intrusions last year were connected to the supply chain. The year before, 1%. Seems that the crooks, the bad guys, are onto something.
Yeah, sure. Think about it. If you can attack an aggregator, instead of being successful with one company, if you get an aggregator, you're successful with 70, 100,000 companies, right? So it's so much more attractive to win or to get into one of these. There are a lot of elements to it. If you think about the last 20 years, the IT risks per se have not changed, right? So you have identity and access management, you have vulnerability management, you have threat management, all that hasn't changed. We have other technologies, other ways of doing things. The problems have shifted, but the fundamental risks are the same. Now we have with the cloud, and we have outsourced the problems with the hope that it goes away or it becomes better. Bad luck. Now it comes worse back, right? So okay. I had once a boss who said, regarding third party, if you pay third party peanuts, you get back monkeys, right? And that's exactly what happens also to your quality of life. Whatever's in the document is just reality, and that has proven several times over the last 20 years. The third party vendor risk is a funny one for the simple reason. Third-party vendor risk is something which is there since many, many years, but it was with the purchasing department, right? They have looked in the past for different control groups like HR, like legal, and things like that, environmental safety, or the health, safety, and environment, all that stuff. And all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, there was cybersecurity. And now you see companies struggling because cybersecurity is most of the time far more complex, and the control group is always late. It takes forever. And, if you want to do a proper assessment about a third party in a different country, take in nearshore, Portugal, whatsoever, and then you have your questionnaire sent there. They send you something back, which is not okay. And then you go back there, it's a ping pong game, easily 4 to 8 weeks, right? And that just slows down everything. And then in addition, in third-party vendor risk, you have 2 dimensions, right? One is the inside-out view, which is completely questionnaire-based, and you have to trust what they say and answer, or you don't, and then you send someone there to really validate, and that's where the top fours or the big fours make a fortune out of it. And then you have the outside-in view. What do you see anything in the dark web? Did they had any, credit card numbers floating around? Have they been attacked? They say they patch in average critical vulnerabilities within 17 days, and the scans show they do it only in 30 days. And so the complexity is huge. And then you have all this data. And the funny thing is, you have 2 ways of getting this data, and maybe even 3. You do it on your own. You ask a big 4, or you join one of these exchanges which do it for you, and you trust what they give you, right? But then, you have an inherent risk of doing business with someone. So then you do a risk assessment, and you get all the risks and all the stuff which is there. And you want to know at the end what is your residual risk really of doing business with them, so that you can either put a cyber insurance on the stuff or remediate what is there, right? So that's proper risk management. But if I get an BitSight or security scorecard score of 486, what does this mean? This is not actionable. I cannot do anything. Okay, now it goes up to 490, or they become better. Great. Do I know anything more about my residual risk of doing business with that company? No, I don't. So there's a huge problem in this third-party vendor risk, that first, it is too slow for the business processes, and that's why often a lot of risks get just accepted. And they say, look, well, we fix it later, and you know exactly when a contract is signed, nothing gets fixed anymore because everyone says, yeah, we are too busy doing business, right? And then the other thing is, it's not a clear measurement there. There's nothing, that is really actionable, that you can really go there and say, look here, yep, I can discuss with them these and these things. Okay, that's get remediated. These and these things get not remediated. I have to accept. I can ensure, and the rest I need to accept. And I have a kind of evaluation against my risk appetite. Not there yet, and that's why it's so fluffy and why it's such a nice attack vector. I would always go third party if I want to attack someone.
Yeah, and is this another form of almost sort of checkbox checking, for lack of a better, going through the security scorecard process so that you can get a lower insurance when you're doing business with certain, to your point, I was talking to Gartner a couple of weeks ago about this very topic, and it just seems like it's a snapshot in time of this particular vendor's risk posture. And then they use that to your point of insurance and compliance, but that's it, right? It's immaterial, so to speak.
But the real security training issue, right? It's a checkbox activity.
Yeah, but for me, there is still. I don't want to say anything negative about companies like Security Scorecard or BitSight, right? Because the value is clearly there if I use it the right way. But if I expect it to say, look, it will solve my problem, it's the holy grail of, that's just wrong, right? You have again the situation that there is compliance. I need to do it now. Tick, I have done it, I'm good, right? And that's what this is all about, and that's fine. If I take it more serious and I say, look here, I really want to know because I'm really afraid about that attack vector, then I need to do more. And I need to do inside out and outside in. I need to find a smart way how to do it, which fits into my process, which does not hinder the business, because every assessment which takes 2 months, we all know this is not going to fly. So we find a better way. That's another area of development, right? So you see consolidation in this market.
Yeah.
There is a lot going on already, and but we haven't majored it yet. There is still a lot which can be done and which needs to be improved. There's a quite interesting discussion currently in cybersecurity in general. You have this shift left, shift right question all the time, right? Mm-hmm. In the third-party vendor risk space, you see both as well. Shift left in the sense that a lot of companies say, look, let's put security early on into the purchasing process, so that at an RFI stage already, I look at every company, just high level, look what industry, where are they, a little bit of background check, but a solid light touch check, even if it sounds straight, solid light touch, but that you get, out of these 10 companies, 2 they're already bad, so that's a shift left. And then on towards the shift right, where they say, look, we have 4,000 vendors, 400, and I'm just making it up, but 400 vendors have access to critical data or provide critical service, and I really want to monitor 24/7. I want them to be scanned all the time. I want the assessment to be done or renewed at least every 3 months or 6 months and all that stuff. So both extremes are not helpful, right? Because the shift right is extremely expensive, and the shift left has the risk that you then say, okay, it's all good, and you don't do the rest anymore, right? So we need that market needs to balance out, and the industry needs to find ways to how to integrate it into an Ariba, an SAP, as it becomes a normal business process in purchasing. I just had a discussion with a CISO here in Switzerland, which calls himself that he's a disruptor, which I'm also CISO who's a disruptor. That always sounds pretty good. And then he talked about third-party vendor risk and using one of the services you just said. I thought, okay, that's very interesting. How is that disrupting? Before we have done it manually. Okay. So, that's the question of, where you start, right? That's always you can see this as disruptive, right? But I think that's the future is broader.
But at the same point, just to go back to the shift left and shift right, and let's say you find the balance, and for the intents and purposes, we're talking about the right side, and you're monitoring to the degree that it's feasible. At the end of the day, you're doing all of that because when your data is in their hands, you don't want them to lose it or them to be a vector of entry, right? So at the end of the day, it's not about the vendor, it's not about the technology they have, it's about the data they're getting and for how long they get it, how much access they have to it, where they can move it, right? It always comes back to the data angle. And so, the real conversation that seems to always just get overshot is what are we doing at the data level, not at the, again, I agree with you. You rack and stack all of your abilities to lower risk. But for some reason, it just seems like data is the last part of the conversation, not the first part of the conversation. Would you agree with that statement?
No, I agree. I think the maturity is just not there, right? The infrastructure, the people understand, the typical, coming from the classification, they understand, but it's not, look at the cloud stuff, right? There you see it as well. You had most of the cloud security vendors were infrastructure oriented, compliance oriented. And now you see the first one saying, that's all cool, but let's be data centric, right? And data first. That's for sure part of the journey. One of my big concerns is in general, the security organization or any organization will never be able to monitor everything, right? Because again, if you have 4,000 vendors, you cannot monitor them because you need an army full of people internally to follow up. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, someone will say, but it was in your record there, you just have not looked at it, right? So things like that. But think about it. Wasn't there a very prominent cyber breach in the US not too long ago, which happened through the provider of the air condition system?
Yes, there was.
So what has the air condition system to do with data? Or with in these kind of scenarios, we often overlook the OT part of the thing because data centric, cool, infrastructure centric based on critical business processes, cool. But if I can get, I have an elevator here next to me. It's Wi-Fi enabled and everything. It took me maybe 3 minutes to hack the system here from my desk and to have access to the controller. And guess what? Because it's connected to my network, from there, it took just another couple of minutes and I was in my own network, right? And so it's just reality. I mean, we are there. Third-party vendor risk is a longer journey to go. That's one of the risks which I think most organizations still completely overlook or underestimate the impact which it may have.
Yeah, you said data-centric, infrastructure-centric. I like the 1-2 punch there. And then maybe as we look to close the conversation, risk-centric as a third one. As the Uber,
totally good. It's a really good thing because that's just the aggregation level on top, right? And you can say I can use the whatever meter attack vectors, and because as soon as I talk about risk, I know exactly I can go down on the weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and the attack and threat scenarios to it, and that's for sure. If I do a proper simulation there on a risk level, I would see something like the OT or think about something like the OT vector.
Yeah.
We're going to have to schedule a separate podcast conversation about
part 2
infrastructure OT. Yeah.
Happy to do so because I got arrested once in the US for hacking a wireless LAN of a company forklifter with these scan guns, for barcode scans, and so therefore. But I was an auditor, so it was clarified quickly. But it was pretty funny when all of a sudden two police cars came and they wanted to arrest me. So therefore, you can do this.
We're going to have to talk about that during the next podcast for sure. Andreas, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. This was a wide-ranging conversation that I'm sure our listeners are going to find. I found it anyway very informative. sure they will as well. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to doing this again with you in the near future.
Thanks very much, Tim and Patrick. It was really nice.
Talk to you later.
For our listeners, check out other Kitecast by going to kiteworks.com/Kitecast.